There is a number that controls the future of every city on Earth. Every parking lot, every Uber ride, every car payment, every auto insurance bill, taxi medallion, gas station, every single way that humans get from one place to another. It all comes down to one number. And this number is the cost per mile of moving something from point A to point B. Right now, for most Americans, that number sits somewhere between 60 and 80 cents per mile. That's what the AAA and the IRS estimate it costs you per mile to own and operate a car when you factor in the payment, the insurance, the gas, the maintenance, the depreciation. For an Uber ride, depending on where you are and what time it is and how drunk you are, you're looking at somewhere from $3 a mile to over $10 on a short trip. A taxi in Manhattan is going to cost you easily more than $5 a mile. Even Waymo, which is Google's self-driving car service, which removes paying the driver from the equation completely because it's self-driving, charges somewhere around $3 per mile depending on the city. But 3 days ago, as of the time of this recording, a vehicle rolled off a production line in Austin, Texas that is designed to do it for 20 cents per mile. This vehicle is Tesla's Cybercab. And if you thought the AI stuff that's happening in the world right now is crazy, wait until I tell you everything that's happening with this product. Because I'm telling you right now, the world is never going to look the same ever again. So let me walk you through exactly how we got here, why it matters, and what it means for your city, your money, your career, and your livelihood. Because all of these will be impacted by this revolutionary product in ways that no one is expecting. But first, I need to tell you about a guy named Henry Ford. You probably heard of him because what's happening right now with the Cybercab is so similar to what happened in 1908 that it's almost eerie. In 1908, the average cost of an automobile in America was about $850. Adjusted for inflation, that's something like $28,000. But the average American worker was making about $500 a year. So a car costs roughly 2 full years of your income. Cars were luxury items that only rich people had. And if you wanted to get around, you walked, you rode a horse, or you took a trolley. Then Henry Ford introduced the Model T. And the first year it came out, it sold for $850, which was nothing special. But Ford was obsessed with one idea, one single, solitary, freaking obsessive idea. He wanted to reduce the cost of production. So he did something nobody had ever done before. He built the moving assembly line. And the idea was very simple. Instead of having skilled craftsmen build an entire car from start to finish, you break the work into tiny, repeatable steps. Each worker does one task over and over again as the car moves along the line. Every step is optimized and every second is measured and no moment is wasted. And the results were absolutely staggering. In 1908, it took about 12 hours to build a Model T, but by 1914, it took 93 minutes, and the price dropped accordingly. By 1924, you could buy a Model T for $260. That same car that cost $850 16 years earlier now costs less than a third of that, and in inflation-adjusted terms, the price fell by about 70%. Now, you would think that when cars got cheap, the total amount of money spent on cars would roughly stay the same, just spread across more people. The horse industry figured, okay, poor people get cars now, but horses will still be the backbone of transportation. Nope. What happened was the total market for personal transportation absolutely exploded. In 1908, there were about 200,000 cars in all of America. By 1927, there were 15 million. The number of cars increased by 75 times because when something that was expensive becomes cheap, people don't just substitute it. People don't just replace their horse with a car. They started commuting. They started living in suburbs. They started taking road trips. They started building drive-in restaurants and shopping malls and an entire suburban civilization that literally would not exist without cheap transportation. An entirely new way of living emerged because the cost per mile of moving a human dropped dramatically. This pattern has a name, and economists call it Jevons Paradox. In 1865, a guy named William Stanley Jevons noticed that when steam engines became more fuel efficient, total coal consumption actually went up, not down. Because cheaper energy meant you could do more things with it. You could have more factories, more trains, more ships. The efficiency made coal more useful, which made people use more of it, which made total consumption skyrocket. Now, the same thing happened with cars, but also the same thing happened with air travel. When airlines were deregulated in 1978 and prices dropped by about 40% over the next 2 decades, the total number of passengers didn't increase by 40%, it increased by over 300%. The same thing happened with computing. Cheaper transistors didn't mean we spent the same amount on computers. computers. It meant we put computers in everything. The same thing happened with data. Cheaper storage didn't mean we stored the same amount. It means we created TikTok and YouTube and uploaded billions of hours of video that nobody would have bothered creating when storage cost $100 per megabyte. This video wouldn't have existed. That's Jevons Paradox. When you make something dramatically cheaper, total usage doesn't go up linearly. It goes up exponentially. The efficiency creates entirely new demand that didn't exist before. Now, this is a very important context to keep in your head as I'm talking about the Cybercab. Let me go ahead and set the stage of everything that's happening with Cybercab right now. On February 17th, 2026, Tesla posted a photo of the team at Gigafactory, Texas, surrounding the very first production Cybercab. Elon Musk congratulated the team, Elon being the CEO of Tesla, with mass production starting in April 2026, which is roughly 2 months from the time of this recording. Now, what is Cybercab exactly? I'm going to explain this from the very basics. I know a lot of you haven't heard of that name or potentially have no idea what's happening in this space, but I think it's very important for all of us to understand why this vehicle is so game-changing and why it's so different from anything that's ever been built before it. The Cybercab is a 2-seat vehicle with a pretty sizable trunk and a large touchscreen in the middle. It sort of looks like a futuristic pod, very clean, very minimal. The target price is under $30,000. For context, the average new car in America right now costs about $50,000. So already you're talking about a vehicle that's significantly cheaper than what most people are buying today. But the thing that makes the Cybercab genuinely unlike anything that's ever been mass produced before is that it has no steering wheel and pedals. And that's obviously very shocking for most people. Every single car ever mass produced in the history of the automobile, going all the way back to the Ford Model T, has had some sort of mechanism for a human to control it. A steering wheel, pedals, a tiller, something. Some way for a person to grab the thing and tell her where to go. The Cybercab doesn't have any of that. You cannot drive this car. It is physically impossible. And this is painting a very clear picture for this specific vehicle. Tesla is not hedging. Or so it seems. They're not doing the thing where you build a car that can sort of drive itself, but also has a steering wheel just in case the software messes up. They are saying with their money, with their engineering, with their entire manufacturing capacity, that their self-driving software is good enough to build a vehicle that a human literally cannot operate manually. That is an insane level of conviction. If the software doesn't work, the car is a paperweight, a very expensive, very shiny, but very useless paperweight. Think about what that decision means. Tesla is betting the entire Cybercab program, which they want to scale to 2 million units per year, on the idea that their full self-driving software, or FSD, which is the software that allowed Tesla vehicles to drive themselves on roads without human input, is going to work without any human intervention whatsoever. There's going to be no safety driver, no steering wheel takeover, nothing as a backup whatsoever. That's pretty crazy when you really think about it. Not to mention that Tesla would have invested billions of dollars into a manufacturing line for a car they potentially can't sell, while in the midst of ramping up investments for their human or robot project, their energy storage projects, and their chip manufacturing plant called the Terafab, that will eventually allow the company to put AI-powered satellites in space. This would be a failure of epic proportions. So the company is betting that this project will be successful, because if it's not, that means billions of dollars wasted. Okay, so now I need to explain how the cost per mile actually gets to 20 cents, because that's really the whole point of the story. If the Cybercab can't hit that number, everything I'm telling you is just academic. But if it can hit that number, it changes the world. So let me walk you through the math piece by piece. There are basically 4 components to the cost per mile of a robotaxi: the vehicle itself, the energy, how much electricity you burn per mile, the maintenance, tires, cleaning, minor repairs, and lastly, insurance and overhead. And you notice there's a big one missing, right? The driver. Because when you don't have a steering wheel and pedals, there's no driver. The single most expensive component of an Uber ride, the human behind the wheel who needs to eat and pay rent and has their own car payment, that cost is zero. So this vehicle is already starting out with a massive advantage. So now the vehicle. Tesla expects Cybercab to have a manufacturing cost somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000. Now, an electric vehicle doesn't have an engine, doesn't have a transmission, doesn't have an exhaust system, doesn't need oil changes. The drivetrain has dramatically fewer moving parts than a gas car. These vehicles are designed to last a very long time. A realistic estimate is about 500,000 miles for the vehicle's useful life, probably longer. So if you take that $25,000 number number and you divide it by 500,000 miles, you get 5 cents per mile just for the vehicle itself. The amortization, which just means spreading the cost of the car over its entire useful life, works out to be around 4 to 5 cents per mile. Now for energy. Electric vehicles are incredibly efficient. A Tesla Model 3 uses about 25 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. The Cybercab is smaller, lighter, and more aerodynamic, so it should be even better. At commercial or fleet electricity prices, call it 10 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is below the residential average of about 18 cents, but realistic for fleet operators who buy in bulk as an example, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 cents per mile for energy. In markets with cheap electricity or where Tesla deploys their own solar and battery storage, which they already build and sell at massive scale through Tesla Energy, that number could be even lower. And then you've got maintenance. With electric vehicles, there's no oil changes. There's no transmission fluid. There's no spark plugs, no timing belts. The main consumable is tires. Tires on an EV last maybe around 40,000 miles, depending on driving conditions. A set of tires costs maybe $600 for the Cybercab, let's say. So that's maybe 2 cents per mile for tires. And then you've got cleaning, because passengers are going to leave a mess. That's just reality, right? You have interior cameras, you have minor repairs, you have software updates. Call it another 2 to 3 cents per mile at a reasonable cleaning fee per month. And so all in, you add that on top of the cleaning fee, that's probably roughly around 5 cents per mile. And lastly, insurance and overhead. You have fleet management, routing software, customer service, regulatory compliance, and liability insurance. All these things are extremely important and can be very costly. But the huge variable is that with self-driving vehicles like the Cybercab, the safety profile of the cars are going to be so much safer than human-driven ones. Tesla and Waymo both publish safety data for their self-driving technology, and both companies land on the same theme. A self-driving car is multiple times safer than a human-driven one. Teslas on FSD, as an example, get into accidents at a 7 times lower rate than Teslas without FSD. As the software gets even better, that means safety will get even better, which will cause the price of the insurance premium to plummet, because less accidents mean less injuries and death, and less injuries and death means way less payouts for insurance companies. And with a car that's insanely safe, that means you won't need that many people to ensure it's operating properly, which means your overhead for fleet management, routing, and customer service plummets. Once Cybercab is fully scaled, the insurance and overhead costs shouldn't exceed 5 cents per mile, if that. So add all those numbers up and you land somewhere between 15 and 20 cents per mile. That's fully loaded at scale. That's how you get that number. Now let me show you what those numbers look like when you stack them up against what people are paying today. The contrast is really going to drive home the point. The average American today drives about 13,500 miles per year. At 20 cents per mile, your entire annual transportation costs will be $2,700. That's $225 per month. As of early 2026, the average car payment in America is about $750 per month. Then you add insurance, call that $150 to $200 a month, gas or electricity, so another $100 to $200. Maintenance will be another $50 to $100. By then, you're easily looking at over $1,000 a month for most people. Some people are paying $1,200 to $1,300 a month to own and operate a car, and others are paying way more. So you go from over $1,000 a month to $225 a month all in. And on top of that, you don't have to park it anywhere, because it drives itself to the parking spot. You don't maintain anything, because in the rare event that something goes wrong with the car and it can drive itself, it'll just drive itself to the shop. You don't need to insure anything, because that'll be baked into the price, and self-driving cars are going to be unbelievably safe. You just open up an app, a car shows up, you get in, it takes you where you need to go, and then you get out. That's the entire experience for $225 a month. Now, remember Jevons Paradox. Remember what happened when the Model T made cars cheap. Remember what happened when airlines got deregulated and tickets dropped. Remember what happened when data storage got cheap. When the cost of something drops by 70 to 80%, people don't just do the same amount of it for less money. They do dramatically more of it. New use cases emerge. New behaviors emerge. Entire new industries emerge that nobody could have predicted. At 20 cents per mile, it becomes clear that you don't just replace your commute to work. You take rides you never would have taken. A quick trip to the grocery store at 10 p.m. because you forgot milk, sure, it costs 40 cents, and maybe the car just brings the milk for you. What about going out to dinner and you normally skip it because it's freaking $30 just for parking downtown? Now the whole round trip costs you $3. Sending your kid to soccer practice and picking them up $2. Elderly people who can't drive anymore but are stuck at home because they can't afford a ride service, they get their independence back for the cost of pocket change. So what happens to total miles traveled? The total miles traveled in autonomous vehicles won't just replace existing car miles, it will multiply it. Because you've unlocked transportation for people who currently can't afford it, can't access it, or choose not to use it because it's too expensive or too inconvenient. That's Jevons Paradox applied to the most fundamental economic activity on the planet, which is moving humans from one place to another. Okay, so now I need to explain why Tesla specifically can do this and other companies can't, or at least can't do it at the same scale or at the same cost, or not yet. Because the Cybercab by itself is just a car. The reason the numbers work is because of everything behind the car. Tesla makes its own cars. Tesla writes its own self-driving software. Tesla designs its own AI training chips. They literally design the silicon that trains and infers the neural network that drives the car. Tesla builds its own supercharger network. Tesla is building inductive wireless charging systems. The FCC just granted them a waiver for ultra-wideband radio technology on February 18th, which allows the Cybercab to position itself over a wireless charging pad with centimeter-level accuracy and charge without anyone plugging it in. Tesla runs the fleet network, the app, the routing, the pricing, the customer experience. That is a full vertical integration where the company controls the entire stack from silicon to software to steel to service. I've been doing this for 14 years and I've never seen a company integrate this deeply across this many layers, except for maybe SpaceX, which is another Elon Musk company. The only comparison I can think of is Apple with the iPhone. They design their own chips, their own software, their own services, their own retail stores, but even Apple doesn't manufacture the physical phone. They outsource it to Foxconn, but Tesla makes the whole thing. So why does this matter? Because every layer you control is a layer where you can optimize cost, speed, and quality without negotiating with the supplier. When Tesla wants to change how the AI chip processes sensor data, they don't need to file a request with the chip vendor, they just change it themselves. Why? Why would they need to reach out to anybody? When they want to modify the charging protocol, they don't have to ask a charging company, they just modify it. Every layer you control is a layer where your competitor has to negotiate, wait, and compromise. And so how does that compare to the competition? Let's look at Waymo as an example, which is Google's self-driving car company. Outsources their vehicle manufacturing to Zeekr, which is a Chinese company, and Hyundai. They use LiDAR sensors on their vehicles. LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging. It's basically a laser-based radar that creates a 3D map of the environment around the car. The full sensor suite on a Waymo vehicle, including multiple LiDAR units, cameras, and radar, has come down a lot, but it still costs somewhere around $9,000 to $13,000 per vehicle, not including installation, which is significantly more expensive than Tesla's camera-only approach that runs maybe $2,000 in hardware, including the harnesses and the onboard AI chip computer. Waymo has roughly 3,000 vehicles deployed right now across a handful of cities. And while they're expanding through partnerships with Zeekr and Hyundai, we're still talking about a fleet that's in the low thousands. Tesla is targeting 2 million Cybercaps per year at scale, and they already have 9 million cars on the road. That's the difference between a pilot program and mass production. Now, is Waymo software good? Yes, it's actually really good. It's super impressive. If you haven't ridden in a Waymo, you should. Waymo operates in geofenced areas, meaning the specific mapped areas where they've pre-driven and documented every street, every intersection, every curb, every traffic cone, every traffic light. Within those zones, Waymo provides a really solid ride. And I've driven in them before multiple times, and I will say I prefer them over regular Ubers because you get the benefit of privacy and consistency. But the question isn't which system drives better in Phoenix. The question is which system scales to every city on Earth at a cost that makes economic sense. Waymo's approach requires pre-mapping every single street they want to operate on. Tesla's approach learns from millions of vehicles driving billions of miles across every road condition imaginable. And the cost difference at scale is devastating. Waymo can't manufacture their own vehicles. They can't make their own sensors. They can't build their own chargers. Every single component in their stack has a middleman taking a margin. Tesla has 0 middlemen in the entire chain. Not to mention that Waymo currently is losing money hand over fist and just raised $16 billion to give them enough runway to scale towards their goal of 10,000 cars per year in partnership with Zeekr. Now, I want to use Jevons Paradox here. because it illustrates the scale point perfectly. Remember, when something gets dramatically cheaper, total usage explodes. If Waymo keeps their cost per mile at $3 because their hardware is expensive and they can't scale production, fine. They'll serve some customers in some cities. But at $3 per mile, they can't unlock the suburban mom who needs 40 miles a day of rides. They can't unlock the teenager who can't afford the car. They can't unlock the elderly person on a fixed income, or the spur-of-the-moment decisions for people that, let's say, might be under the influence, kind of. They're too expensive for the Jevons effect to kick in. But Tesla, at 20 cents per mile, unlocks all of that demand. And the market that opens up at 20 cents is 10 to 50 times bigger than the market that exists at $3. And obviously, that's not just a competitive disadvantage, right? For Waymo, it's way more worse. That's terrible. That's an extinction level event. These types of dynamics are going to be extremely common in the next 5 to 10 years, especially as AI-powered products like the Cybercab permeate the world. And I cover these variables in large detail in my new book, Abundance or Collapse, which will help you position yourself on the winning side of the insane disruption that's about to hit all of us. I have a link for that in the description and in the pinned comment section below. Okay, so let me talk about how Tesla is actually building the Cybercab thing. The manufacturing story is just as important as the vehicle itself. Tesla is using what they call the Unboxed manufacturing process for the Cybercab. Traditional car manufacturing has been done basically the same way since the 1920s. You stamp flat sheets of metal into body panels. You weld those panels together into a body shell. That's the box. Then you paint the whole thing. Then you shove everything, the engine, the wiring, the seats, the dashboard, inside through the doors and openings. It's called body-in-white manufacturing, and the entire global auto industry does it this way. Every Ford, Toyota, BMW, the same basic process. Tesla's Unboxed approach is fundamentally different. Instead of building the whole body first and then stuffing things inside, they build different sections of the car simultaneously in dedicated sub-assembly areas. The front section with the motor and suspension gets built in one area. The rear section with the battery pack gets built in another area. The interior module gets assembled separately. Then at the end, all these pre-built sections come together. It's kind of like building with Lego blocks versus carving from a solid block of wood. So why does this matter? Because when you build things in parallel, your factory is dramatically more efficient. Tesla says this approach reduces the factory footprint by 40% and cuts production costs by up to 50%. Now, the Cybercab also has about half the parts of the Model 3. And so think about what that means. Fewer parts mean fewer things to assemble, fewer things that can break, fewer suppliers, fewer points of failure, lower cost. The vehicle is radically simplified because when you remove the steering wheel, the pedals, the driver's seat adjustment, the mirrors, the rear view camera display, the turn signal stalks, all the stuff that exists because a human needs to operate the car, you eliminate a massive chunk of complexity. Elon said the target is one Cybercab rolling off the line every 10 seconds. He described it as being closer to a high-volume consumer electronics device than a car manufacturing line. One car every 10 seconds is 6 per minute, 360 per hour. If the line runs 20 hours a day with 4 hours for maintenance, let's say, that's 7,200 vehicles per day from one line, over 2 million per year from one factory. That's the scale Tesla is targeting. Now, Ford's innovation with the Model T, the moving assembly line, reduced build time from 12 hours to 93 minutes and dropped the price by 70%. Tesla's innovation with Unboxed manufacturing is attempting something similar. Cut the parts in half, cut the factory size by 40%, the cost by 50%, build them faster than anyone thought possible. And the thing that makes this direct parallel to 1908 is the same thing that made Ford's approach so powerful. It's so much cheaper that it unlocks entirely new markets, just like the Model T made cars accessible to the average American. The Cybercab is designed to make autonomous transportation accessible to everyone. Jevons Paradox again. The manufacturing innovation drives down the cost. The cost reduction unlocks new demand. The new demand funds more manufacturing, and the whole cycle feeds on itself. It's a flywheel. Okay, so now let's talk about regulation, which is the side of the story that has gotten really interesting. Congress in the United States introduced the Self-Drive Act, H.R. 7390. With initial bipartisan support, though, it's had some bumps in the bill a little bit. The bill creates a federal set of rules for autonomous vehicles. In practice, it means instead of Tesla having to go state by state, city by city, getting permission to operate, which is a nightmare because Texas allows it, California has its own separate rules, New York is like, hell no, there would instead be a national standard. The bill authorizes the Department of Transportation and NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is the government agency that regulates car safety, to create rules for how companies certify that their autonomous vehicles are safe. A federal standard would preempt conflicting state regulations and give companies like Tesla a clear path to nationwide deployment, which is massive in theory. Now, let me talk about what happens to the industries that exist if this bill passes. When cars replaced horses, the horse industry didn't just shrink by a little bit, an entire web of industries disappeared. Blacksmiths, stable operators, hay farmers, harness makers, horse breeders, carriage builders. So many jobs either disappeared entirely or shrank to a fraction of their former size. But the total economic output of transportation grew enormously because cars enable things horses never could. The same kind of disruption cascade is coming for the industries built around human-driven cars. So which industries are we talking about? Let me walk through some of them. I think most people really don't understand what's about to happen here. Let's start with auto insurance. That's a $300 billion industry in the United States alone. The entire business model is based on the probability that human drivers will have accidents. If autonomous vehicles reduce accidents by 80 to 90% over time or more, which is a long-term potential of this technology, because computers don't drive drunk, they don't text, they don't fall asleep, they don't get road rage, what happens to insurance premiums? They collapse. The industry doesn't disappear overnight, but it shrinks dramatically. A $300 billion industry could become a $30 billion industry. Then, parking. Americans spend tens of billions of dollars per year on parking. Meters, garages, lots, monthly passes. If your car drops you off and goes to pick up someone else, who needs a parking spot? All those parking garages in downtown areas are gone. That's some of the most expensive real estate in any city. And suddenly it becomes available for housing, parks, offices, whatever the city needs. Also, gas stations. If the fleet is electric, gas stations in their current form become obsolete. Some will convert to charging stations, but an autonomous fleet charges at centralized depots. You don't need scattered gas stations on every corner anymore. Then you have auto repair shops. EVs already need dramatically less maintenance than gas cars. There's no oil changes, no transmission work, no exhaust repairs. Autonomous EVs need even less because they drive more efficiently than humans. They don't slam on brakes unnecessarily. They don't ride the clutch. They maintain optimal speeds. The repair shop industry shrinks significantly. Then everyone's favorite, auto dealerships. If you don't need to own a car because autonomous rides cost $225 a month all in, why would you walk into a dealership to get completely and utterly scammed? The dealer model, which is already under massive pressure from Tesla's direct sales approach, takes another massive hit and disappears entirely. How about driving schools? If nobody needs to learn how to drive, that's a $2 billion industry that just goes away. It's gone. What about DUI lawyers, traffic cops, traffic court, body shops, car washes? All of these exist because humans drive cars and humans make mistakes. Remove the human and the downstream industries that profit from human error start disappearing. And there are so many other examples that will be fundamentally disrupted. But the biggest variable of all, about 40,000 Americans die in car accidents every year. 40,000 people every single year. The overwhelming majority caused by human error. Drunk driving, texting, fatigue, road rage. If autonomous vehicles can cut that even in half, that's 20,000 lives saved per year. 20,000 people who go home to their families. The moral case is overwhelming, but the economic disruption that comes with it is also overwhelming. Now, let me talk about the people who get hurt, because I think being honest about both sides is really, really important in this discussion, and I'd be lying to you if I pretended all of this is upside. About 3.5 million Americans drive trucks for a living. Another million or so drive taxis, ride-hailing services, and delivery vehicles. When autonomous vehicles become cheaper and more reliable than human drivers, and they will, The economics are just too brutal. It's a matter of when, not if, those jobs start disappearing. They're not going to happen all at once, but over the next 5 to 10 years, the economics become undeniable and companies will start making the switch. That's going to be millions of people who need new careers. Without government programs to help retrain and support them through that transition, you're looking at serious social upheaval. The same way the horse industry workers in 1910 needed to find new jobs when Ford's assembly lines made cars cheap. Transportation workers in 2030 are going to face the same transition. And this is before we even mention the massive shrinkage of the horse population because humans didn't have a need for them anymore outside of hobbyist purposes in most cases. This is massively disruptive. But here's the big difference. It's going to happen much faster this time because technology moves faster now than it did in 1910. But on the flip side, there's massive opportunity, and it comes down to an entirely new business model that exists when self-driving cars become prevalent. Tesla has said that individual people will be able to buy Cybercabs for under $30,000 and put them on Tesla's ride-hailing network. You buy a car for $30,000 and the car goes out and works for you. It picks up passengers, it drives them around, it earns money, it drives itself to a wireless charging pad, it charges up, and it goes back out again. And then in theory, you collect the revenue minus Tesla's platform cut, which looks to be about 25% of the revenue based on the latest reports. It's not confirmed yet though. Some optimistic estimates suggest a single Cybercab operating most of the day could generate significant annual revenue. The most bullish projections from analysts put it at tens of thousands per year. Now, utilization rates in the taxi and ride-hailing industry range from about 32% to 55%, meaning the vehicle has passengers somewhere between a third and half the time it's on the road. The rest of that time, it's repositioning, waiting, charging. So the actual revenue depends heavily on how efficiently Tesla can manage the fleet and match supply with demand in real time using software. That's a software optimization problem. And if there's one thing Tesla has proven over the last 14 years, is that they can do software, one would hope. So what does that look like in practice? Even at conservative estimates, you're looking at a vehicle that could pay for itself relatively quickly and then generate income for years after that. You buy the car goes to work. You collect the check. And of course, I'm simplifying a bit here, but that's the basic idea from Tesla. Now, Jevons Paradox makes this model especially powerful. As the fleet grows and costs drop further, more people can afford rides. More demand means more revenue per vehicle. More revenue per vehicle means more people buy Cybercabs for the fleet. More vehicles in the fleet means better coverage and shorter wait times. Better coverage and shorter wait times means more people use the service instead of owning a car. More users means more revenue. Again, another flywheel. And it's the same dynamic that made Ford's Model T go from about 200,000 units total to 15 million. Except this time, the flywheel has software optimization, AI learning, and global deployment built in, so it should spin even faster. The global robotaxi market was valued at about $400 million in 2023, and by 2030, analysts project it'll be at around $45 billion. That's a 92% compound annual growth rate. We're talking about an industry going from basically nothing to one of the largest transportation markets on the planet in about 7 years. And of course, Tesla wants to own the majority of that. But now let me talk about legacy automakers, because this is almost a carbon copy of what happened with EVs a decade ago, what's called the good old innovator's dilemma. 10 years ago, legacy automakers like Ford, GM, Stellantis, Toyota, Volkswagen, Nissan, they laughed off electric vehicles. They crushed their own EV programs. They bet everything on the internal combustion engine. Then Tesla scaled up and they spent billions of dollars scrambling to catch up. And now all of them have given up because it's become obvious they can't compete anymore against the likes of Tesla and Chinese EV manufacturers. Well, guess what? The same exact thing is happening right now again. Elon has publicly said he's offered to license Tesla's full self-driving technology to other automakers. They all said no. They all think they can build better ones in-house, or they would rather work with someone else, even though their own programs are stumbling through recalls, layoffs, and missed milestones. The structural problem is that to implement something like Tesla's FSD, they need to completely rebuild the electrical architecture of their vehicles. You can't just bolt a software update onto a 2024 Ford F-150. The cameras, the computing hardware, the wiring, it all needs to be designed from the ground up. Not to mention that it would have to be electric. Otherwise, the economics don't make sense. That kind of overhaul takes years. By the time they figure it out, Tesla will have millions of Cybercabs on the road, generating data and getting smarter every single day. The gap gets wider, not narrower. And I think most legacy automakers, with the possible exception of Kia Hyundai, who have actually been pretty impressive in their attempts to survive the transition, are going to get absolutely crushed by this transition. The direction is extremely clear. Transportation is going autonomous. It's going electric. It's going to get ridiculously cheap. The Cybercab is the vehicle designed to make that happen. The first one literally just rolled off the line. And in 2 months, they start mass production. We are watching the beginning of the end of car ownership as a necessity, not as a hobby. Some people will always want to drive their sports car on the weekends, and good for them. I celebrate it. I'm going to start a manual transmission car collection here very shortly, hopefully. But the obligation to own a car, the $1,000 per month burden, the insurance paperwork, the oil changes, the parking tickets, the depreciation that eats your life alive every single year, dealing with a freaking dealership. All of that becomes optional when autonomous rides cost less than your monthly streaming subscriptions put together. So where does that leave us? Let's go back to 1908. Henry Ford saw a world where cars were luxury items for the wealthy, and he decided there should be tools for everyone. He built the assembly line. That slashed prices by 70%. And by doing that, he created an entirely new civilization built around affordable personal transportation. 118 years later, Tesla is looking at a world where transportation itself is a luxury. You either pay $1,000 a month for a car or you pay through the nose for an Uber, and they're deciding it should cost pocket change. The cost per mile of moving a human is about to drop by 70 to 80%. Moving humans also applies to moving things. But if Jevons Paradox holds, and it has held for every major cost reduction in transportation history, from horses to cars to planes to data, then the total number of miles traveled in autonomous vehicles is not just going to match current car usage, it's going to 5x, 10x, 50x, entire new industries, entire new ways of living, entire new economic possibilities are born. That's not a car, that's a civilizational shift. We truly seem to be living through one of the most exceptional times, the craziest times in history. The things we're seeing, freaking cars that drive themselves, AI that writes code, robots that walk and dance and fight, that would have sounded like pure science fiction not even 2 years ago. And what's even more exciting or scary is that it feels like we're just getting started. And look, if you're holding Tesla stock through all of this and you're feeling the intensity of the moment, which I know a lot of you are Tesla investors that watch this channel, the conviction required to hold through this kind of shift where half the world thinks it's going to work and the other thinks it's freaking insane, the psychology of that is probably 10 times harder than the analysis itself. Bradford Ferguson, a Rebellionaire, has a whole video specifically about why most people could never hold Tesla through these kinds of moments. It breaks down the mental game, the ambiguity, the emotional swings, the pressure from people around you who don't understand what you see. I'll link the video below. These are the same guys who called Elon selling his shares a month before that very famous Twitter poll. So they have some weight behind what they say. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was informative and helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.